You're listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks, your source for centered and focused play therapy coaching.
Hi, I'm Dr. Brenna Hicks, the Kid Counselor. This is the Play Therapy Podcast where you get a masterclass in child-centered play therapy and practical support and application for your work with children and their families. In today's episode, I am answering actually 3 questions from Melissa in Colorado. So Melissa, thank you for the email and thanks for giving us a chance to dive into these together. So the first is about when we have to terminate early with a child and the process and how the child receives and responds to the early termination. The second is about rewards for desired behaviors. Yikes, I'm shuddering at that conversation, but we'll dive in. And then children that are experiencing night terrors. So a pretty vast variety here of conversation topics today, but I think all are really helpful. So we'll hit each of them together. So I'm going to read parts of her email and then we'll dive into each question. So the first is a 4-year-old that she had been seeing for 6 sessions and needed to terminate and refer him to a different therapist because of pregnancy. And so I won't read all of it, but I'll hit some highlights for you. So essentially, he was pretty closed off at the beginning. Then he became more engaged. He was pretty resistant. So every time she would use the skills, he would say, "Don't say that," or stick his tongue out. And then there was a lot of inconsistency with the sessions. So parents were not bringing him every week. So then there was a gap there and some difficulty with making sure that there were weekly sessions. So then when he came back, he was hesitant, but eventually did, and then destroyed the room. So, oh yes, room wrecks. They're so fun. Collateral damage. All right. So he was hitting her in the face, throwing things at her. And then he would say, "Does it hurt?" when he would throw things. And then when she set a limit, he went, like, for example, "My face is not for hitting." He would say, "No, it is." I'm digressing for a second, but I love it when you set a limit and the child just basically comes back with the opposite. Like you say, "Oh, the wall's not for drawing on." "Yes, it is." I find that so funny. I'm like, you clearly have no abstract reasoning whatsoever. Anyway, so he's arguing that her face is for hitting. And so her question is, "I want to know how to better handle the moments when the aggression is directed at you as the therapist. This was my first time having a kid with that much aggression." And so it was just kind of a surprise. And then the final session, he was completely closed off and distant and used a pillow to build bridges and hid under them and was basically very disengaged in the final session. So how she could have handled that better is the question. All right, so we've talked a lot about aggression, but general rule is if the child is actively violating a limit before you've even started stating the limit. In other words, they're already hitting you, they're already throwing things at you, they're already in the midst of whatever it is that the limit would be required, you jump straight to the neutral limit first. So, "Ooh, I'm not for hitting." That's the first thing that you say. So instead of going ACT, you do CACT. So, "Ooh, my face is not for hitting," or "I'm not for hitting." Then go back to, "You're really wanting to show me how strong you are," or "You want me to know how upset that made you," or whatever the feeling is. Then reminder of the limit that's already been set. "My face is not for hitting." And then you offer the choices instead. So that is your go-to. Now, sometimes things are happening at such rapid fire pace, you feel like you can't even get 3 words out, let alone an entire limit. So at that point, you default directly to neutral limit as fast as you can utter it. That was 2 words combined. And you then just say, "Ooh, I'm not for hitting." And you say it with an emphatic, pretty direct tone. It is not heavy. It's not angry. It's not anxious. It's not emotional at all. But you say it with a firm, clear, direct voice. "Ooh, I'm not for hitting." and then you soften. You're really throwing those hard, but I'm not for throwing things at. Whatever. You gentle and soften after you've already said it very directly. And then when it's directed at you, first of all, we talk about this in coaching quite a bit. It's not about you, even though it feels very personal. And when you're on the receiving end of aggression, especially physical aggression, because verbal aggression is pretty awful, but in a different way. When there's physical aggression aimed directly at us, it can feel very personal and it can be very hard to tolerate and handle, especially neutrally, since we're in the neutrality podcast series. But the goal is that you recognize it as a means to an end. There's no other person in the playroom to direct any of the behavior or the words or the attitudes or whatever at. He can't be aggressive toward anyone else. He can't say mean things to anyone else. He can't try to hurt anyone else. He can't be dysregulated in front of anyone else. It's you and only you. So it's not personal. You have to remember that. You have to remain neutral because you have to recognize it for what it is and accept it for what it is. It's necessary play. Kids almost always have to play aggressively. Almost always. And that looks different for different children, but there's almost always aggressive play in the course of treatment. And when it's at us, directed at us, it is harder. But it's the same principles if the child was being aggressive toward Bobo. We set limits when necessary, and otherwise we neutrally accept it for what it is. And the fact that, you only saw him for 6 or 7 sessions and then had to transfer and he had to terminate, and that made everything much more complicated. So I think he was probably angry at you. I think he was probably pretty resentful. And there was a lot wrapped up in that being directed toward you. I think more than just traditional play. I think that was probably trying to have revenge and help you know how angry he was at you. So there are layers to that. And that's another thing that we have to face as we do this work. And if we do it long enough, there are going to be times when circumstances mean that kids get angry at us. And sometimes they want us to know it. And it's not fun to be on the receiving end of that anger. But again, neutral acceptance and limits when necessary. Okay, so let's move on to what are my thoughts on rewards for desired behaviors. For example, I have parents who have kids who are constantly wetting themselves and have a hard time with why. I know that in an episode you talked about something similar, but I can't seem to find it again. If I remember correctly, you said that it is a start, but it shouldn't be the only thing. Let me know if I'm remembering it wrong. Okay. We can't always stop a parent from using a reward chart. So if they want to work on making sure the child uses the toilet and they want to do a sticker chart, and if you get 5 stickers in a row, you earn whatever. I understand the premise. I know that's an educational model that's in schools all the time. I'm treading lightly here because I know that there's all kinds of support for that kind of approach. Kids need immediacy and kids need very clear connection to action and consequence. So I don't know if I've ever shared this story before, but I think maybe I did. I don't know. Maybe on the parenting podcast, I forget to whom I say what. When our son was potty training, he's 15 now. So, I'm going back quite a ways, but when he was potty training, the thing that made the most sense to me was make it fun. So when he was learning to pee in the toilet, he was aiming at Cheerios floating in the water. That makes it really fun. And then his reward, if you will, was when and it was a choice. Let's be very clear. It was a choice. If you choose to go to the bathroom in the toilet, you choose consequence. And for him, it was a Tic Tac. He loved orange Tic Tacs. So, you know what? If you pee in the toilet, you've chosen to have a Tic Tac. If you poop in the toilet, you've chosen to have 2 Tic Tacs. So the moral of the story is there was immediacy there. As soon as he used the toilet, he got a Tic Tac. This notion of a chart or a system or whatever where they have to accrue things, 5 days, 3 days, 4 hours is an eternity to a child. And this whole notion, if you get 5 stickers in a row, then you're going to get to go to the ice cream shop at the end of the week. That is not incentivizing. That is not motivating. It does not address the child's currency or their need for immediacy and their lack of awareness of time. So I think the only way that something like that works is that if it is framed in a choice and if it is immediate in nature. So you chose to pee in the toilet, you choose to get a Tic Tac. That is how this works. I think anything beyond that, it's just something that adults do that they think will work, but it doesn't actually work. So that's my thought on rewards. And generally speaking, let me just be really clear. Oh, how do I say this diplomatically? Rewards fly in the face of the child-centered model because that means there's external motivation, there's extrinsic locus of control, and the child learns that if I please someone or do what someone wants me to do, then I get value and acknowledged. That is not adherent to CCPT. So just generally speaking, let's avoid rewards. Let's avoid parents using rewards. Let's help teachers understand why a reward-based system is not effective with children. We want kids to choose to do the right thing. We want kids to choose to obey. We want kids to choose to self-control. That is internally motivated. Intrinsic locus of control. That doesn't happen from rewards. Treasure box, prize box, sticker charts. It does not make sense with kids that aren't rational and kids that have no sense of time. So that's my diplomatic approach to the rewards. Okay, I don't think I was very diplomatic, but I tried. All right, finally, night terrors. I've had a lot of parents reporting that their kids are having night terrors and they aren't sure why. Some parents say that night terrors occur when the child is overstimulated after a long day. I'm wondering if you have any insights on this. All right, it is actually very normal in childhood for children to have night terrors. That's a pretty consistent part of development. So I think we have to normalize first and foremost. And I absolutely agree with you when the child is emotionally overwhelmed, usually related to therapy. So when kids get into therapy, sometimes night terrors spike because it's bringing up a lot of stuff. When kids have had a very exhausting day, when they've been overstimulated, when their nervous systems are frazzled, there's often comorbidity with night terrors. So first, I think parents need to be reassured that they're normal and it's not something they need to be especially concerned about. It's also helpful to make them aware that it's connected to somatic stuff and emotional stuff. So when kids are stressed, when they're anxious, when they're overwhelmed, when therapy brings up a whole bunch of stuff, we usually see an uptick in reactions like that. So that's just a pretty standard part of the process, and helping parents understand that they shouldn't be overly concerned about it is usually pretty reassuring. As far as how to help parents deal with the night terrors, most often kids are not fully awake during a night terror. So trying to talk to them, communicate with them, interact with them, it usually does not work. They actually are asleep, even though they do not present as asleep. And often they're quite irritable in a night terror. So if you try to talk to them or try to soothe them, it often angers them more. So the most helpful thing that we have found at the center, and even just personally, is that you just say, it's okay, it's time to go to bed. It's okay, let's get back in bed. It's okay, let's go to sleep. Very, very short, soft, gentle, quick phrases, and help the child lay back down. And usually that allows them to get back into a calm state of sleep, since they were in a very aroused state of sleep in a night terror. All right. So Melissa, I hope that that's helpful for you. I hope that's helpful for each of you as you listen and as you work with kids and their families. I love you all. If you want to reach out, please do Brenna@thekidcounselor.com. And okay, I forgot almost. I remembered at the last second. There is an official meetup in Mississippi planned now. So please, if you are going to attend the conference or if you're within driving distance of Oxford, Mississippi, please sign up for the meetup, and details to follow, but it will be that Friday, the 20th. And we will have a meetup in the square, which is kind of the downtown area of Oxford, a very historic area. Really looking forward to that. I've already chatted with several people that are coming to the conference, and I can't wait to meet you all. So if you can make it to Oxford, Mississippi, just south of Tennessee, then it would be so much fun to have a lot of people turn up at the meetup. So make sure that you go to the show notes so that you can RSVP to the event. All right. Love y'all. We'll talk again soon. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Play Therapy Podcast with Dr. Brenna Hicks. For more episodes and resources, please go to www.playtherapypodcast.com.